It was a cold Thursday afternoon in late November. The kind of day where the sky looks gray and heavy, like it might rain at any moment. People were rushing through the streets, heads down, shoulders hunched against the wind. Nobody was stopping to talk. Nobody was smiling. Everyone just wanted to get where they were going and get out of the cold dot in the middle of downtown Chicago. There was a big shopping mall. You know the type. 3 floors of stores, bright lights everywhere, and that constant hum of noise that never seems to stop. Music playing from the speakers. People talking on their phones. Kids crying. Shopping bags rustling. It was the usual chaos of a busy weekday. On the second floor, tucked into a corner near a furniture store, there was a piano. It was a display model, sitting there mostly for decoration. The keys were a little dusty. Some of the white ones had turned slightly yellow from age. A small sign next to it said, "Please do not touch," but the sign had fallen over weeks ago, and nobody had bothered to fix it. Most people walked right past that piano without even noticing it. It was just part of the background, like the faked plants and the benches that nobody sat on. Employees from nearby stores would sometimes glance at it when they passed by, but that was it. The piano had been sitting there for almost 2 years, and in all that time, hardly anyone had ever played it. That afternoon, a woman walked into the mall with her son. She looked tired. Not just regular tired, but the kind of tired that goes deep into your bones. The kind that comes from working double shifts and still not having enough at the end of the month. She was carrying 2 plastic bags from a discount store, and her jacket was thin for the weather. But she walked with her head up, the way people do when they have learned to keep going, no matter what doubt her son walked beside her. He was small for his age, maybe 9 or 10 years old. His sneakers were old, the soles wearing thin, and his jacket was clearly a hand-me-down, too big in the shoulders and too long in the sleeves. But his eyes were bright. That was the first thing you would notice about him if you looked closely. His eyes had this spark in them, like he was always thinking about something, always noticing things that other people missed. They were just passing through the mall to get to the bus stop on the other side. It was faster to cut through than to walk around the building in the cold. The mother was walking quickly, checking her watch, probably thinking about all the things she still had to do before the day was over. But the boy stopped. Right there in the middle of the walkway, he just stopped. His mother took a few more steps before she realized he was not beside her anymore. She turned around, a little annoyed, ready to tell him to hurry up. He was staring at the piano dot. It was like he had seen something magical. His whole body had gone still. His eyes were fixed on those dusty keys, and there was something in his expression that was hard to describe. It was not just interest. It was something deeper, something that looked almost like hunger. His mother sighed. She walked back to him and put a hand on his shoulder. She said something to him quietly, probably telling him they needed to go. They would miss the bus. They did not have time for this. But the boy did not move. He just kept looking at the piano dot now. Here's where things get interesting. A security guard was standing nearby. He was an older man, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and a tired face. He had been working at that mall for almost 15 years, and he had seen just about everything. Kids running wild, teenagers causing trouble, people trying to steal things. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. He watched the boy staring at the piano, and he felt something twist in his chest. He could not explain it. There was just something about the way that kid was looking at those keys. Like the piano was calling to him. Like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. The guard looked at the mother. He could see she was in a hurry. He could see she was tired. He could see that life had not been easy for her. But he also saw the way she was looking at her son, with that mixture of love and worry that all parents know. He made a decision. He walked over to them. And in a quiet voice, he said it was okay. The boy could play if he wanted to. Just for a minute, the mother hesitated. She looked at her son, then at the guard, then at her watch. For a moment, it seemed like she would say no. They really did need to catch that bus. They really did not have time. But then she looked at her son again, and something in his eyes made her change her mind. She nodded that the boy did not need to be told twice. He walked over to the piano slowly, almost carefully, like he was approaching something sacred. He climbed onto the bench. His feet barely reached the floor. He sat there for a moment, just looking at the keys, not touching them. A few people nearby glanced over. A woman with shopping bags. A teenager on his phone. A couple holding hands. They noticed the small boy sitting at the piano, and most of them probably thought the same thing. Here comes some noise. Some kid banging on the keys. They braced themselves for the sound of random notes and clumsy fingers. The boy lifted his hands, and then something happened that nobody expected. He placed his fingers on the keys gently, almost lovingly. He took a breath, and then he began to play. The first notes were soft. So soft that at first, people were not sure they were hearing anything at all. But then the music grew. It swelled and rose and filled the space around them. It was not random banging. It was not a simple children's song. It was something else entirely. It was beautiful. The melody floated through the air like something alive. It wrapped around the people nearby and made them stop what they were doing. The woman with the shopping bags froze. The teenager looked up from his phone. The couple stopped walking. Even the security guard, who thought he had seen everything, stood there with his mouth slightly open. More people began to notice. Shoppers on their way to the escalator paused and turned around. Employees stepped out of their stores to see what was happening. Within a minute, a small crowd had formed around the piano, and it was growing by the second. But the boy did not seem to notice any of them. His eyes were closed now, and his small body swayed gently with the music. His fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible. This was not the playing of a child learning simple songs. This was something different. Something special. His mother stood at the edge of the crowd, tears forming in her eyes. She had known her son was talented. She had heard him practice on the old keyboard at the community center, the one with the broken keys that he had to work around. But she had never heard him play like this. Not like this. The music continued to pour out of him, filling them all with something that had not been there before. Something that made people stop their rushing and their worrying and their endless thinking about all the things they had to do. For just a few minutes, everyone in that corner of the mall was connected by something bigger than themselves. And it was all coming from a small boy in an oversized jacket, sitting at a dusty piano that nobody had touched in years. Nobody knew it yet. But they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. This was the moment that would change everything. Not just for the boy, but for everyone who was about to hear his story. But we will get to that. For now, the boy just played, and the world listened. The crowd kept growing. People were coming from all directions now, drawn by the sound of the music like moths to a flame. Some of them did not even know why they were walking toward that corner of the mall. They just felt pulled there, like something invisible was tugging at them. A woman who had been shopping for shoes stopped in the middle of trying on a pair of heels. She walked out of the store with one heel on and one heel off, not even noticing. A man who had been arguing with someone on his phone suddenly went quiet, lowering the phone from his ear, forgetting whatever he had been so angry about. Two teenagers who had been laughing loudly at something on social media fell silent and just stood there, watching. The boy kept playing. His fingers danced across the keys like they had been doing this forever. Like he had been born knowing exactly where each note lived, exactly how hard to press, exactly when to pause and when to let the music breathe. There was no hesitation in his movements, no stumbling, no mistakes, just pure, flowing music that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. The piece he was playing was not something simple. It was not a song you would hear on the radio or in a movie. It was classical music, the kind that takes trained pianists years to master, the kind that music teachers save for their most advanced students, the kind that fills concert halls where people pay hundreds of dollars to sit and listen. And here it was, pouring out of a small boy in a warm jacket in the middle of a shopping mall, on a dusty piano that nobody had cared about until 5 minutes ago. That older woman near the front of the crowd had tears running down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She just let them fall. Later, she would tell her daughter that she had not cried like that in years, that something about the music had unlocked a door inside her that she had kept closed for a long time. A young father was holding his toddler on his hip. The little girl had been fussy all day, squirming and whining like toddlers do. But now she was completely still. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the boy at the piano. Her tiny hand was resting on her father's chest, and she was not moving at all. It was like the music had cast a spell on her. The security guard, who had given the boy permission to play, stood at the back of the crowd. He had his arms crossed over his chest, and there was a look on his face that was hard to read. Pride, maybe, or wonder, or something like recognition, like he was seeing a younger version of himself in that boy. Someone who had dreams once. Someone who had been told those dreams were too big. He thought about all the times he had told kids to stop running in the mall. All the times he had asked teenagers to turn down their music. All the times he had been the one to say, "No, stop, you cannot do that here." And now here he was, standing in front of something beautiful, something real, and he had been the one to say yes. Just this once, he had said yes. He was glad he did. The boy's mother had not moved from her spot at the edge of the crowd. Her shopping bags sat on the floor by her feet, forgotten. Her hands were pressed against her mouth, and her shoulders were shaking slightly. She was trying not to cry, but she was losing that battle. She thought about all the times her son had asked for piano lessons. All the times she had to tell him they could not afford it. All the times she had watched him sit at the old keyboard at the community center, teaching himself note by note, video by video, refusing to give up even when the keys stuck and the sound was tinny and wrong. She thought about the nights when she came home late from work and found him still practicing in the dim light, his small fingers moving over imaginary keys on the kitchen table because he did not want to forget what he had learned. She thought about how she had worried about him, this quiet boy who seemed to live in his own world, a world made of music that she could not always hear. Now she could hear it. Everyone could dot someone in the crowd, pulled out their phone, and started recording. Then another person did the same. Then another. Within seconds, there were dozens of phones in the air, all pointed at the boy, all capturing this moment that none of them had expected to find on a random Thursday afternoon. A store manager came out to see what was causing the commotion. He was a serious-looking man in a neat suit, the kind of person who always seemed to be thinking about schedules and sales numbers and things that needed to get done. He pushed his way to the front of the crowd, probably ready to put a stop to whatever was happening. But when he saw the boy, he stopped. When he heard the music, his face changed. The hardness melted away, just for a moment, and something softer took its place. He did not say anything. He did not try to stop the performance. He just stood there and listened like everyone else. The music built to something bigger now. The notes came faster, more intense, filling the air with a sound that was almost too big for the space. It bounced off the walls and the ceiling and the floors. It wrapped around the people in the crowd and made them feel things they did not have words for. Some people closed their eyes. Some people held hands with strangers standing next to them. Some people just breathed deeply, letting the music wash over them like water. And then slowly the piece began to wind down. The notes became softer, gentler, like a storm passing and leaving calm in its wake. The boy's movements slowed. His fingers touched the keys more lightly now, drawing out the last few notes with care, like he was saying goodbye to something precious. The final note hung in the air for a long moment. It seemed to float there, suspended, not wanting to fade away. And then there was silence, not complete silence. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. The whole crowd just stood there, frozen in the echo of what they had just heard. Then someone started, clapping. It was the older woman with the tears on her cheeks. She brought her hands together once, twice, and then faster. The sound broke the spell. Suddenly everyone was clapping. The applause exploded through the mall like thunder. People were cheering. People were whistling. People were wiping their eyes and shaking their heads in disbelief. The boy opened his eyes. He looked around at the crowd like he was waking up from a dream, like he had forgotten where he was while he was playing. There was surprise on his face and maybe a little bit of fear. He was not used to this. He was not used to people watching him, applauding him, seeing him. His mother pushed through the crowd and wrapped her arms around him. She held him tight, not saying anything, just holding him like she never wanted to let go. The boy buried his face in her shoulder, and for a moment they were the only two people in the world. The applause continued. People were talking excitedly to each other. "Did you see that? Did you hear that? How old is he? Where did he learn to play like that?" The questions buzzed through the crowd like electricity. But there was one person in the crowd who was not just watching. One person who was not just clapping and asking questions like everyone else. She was a woman in her 60s, standing near the back with silver hair and sharp eyes. She had stopped at the mall to buy a gift for her nephew, nothing more. But now she was staring at the boy with an expression that was different from everyone else. It was not just amazement or admiration, it was recognition. She knew talent when she saw it. She had spent her entire life around it. And what she had just witnessed was not ordinary. It was not even extraordinary. It was something rare. Something that comes along once in a generation, if you are lucky. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small card. Then she began making her way through the crowd toward the boy and his mother. She had no idea that she was about to change their lives forever. But that is what was about to happen. To understand what happened next, you need to understand where this boy came from. You need to know his story. Because talent like his does not just appear out of nowhere. It grows. It fights. It survives against all odds. And his story is one of those stories that makes you believe in something bigger than yourself. He grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. The kind of building where the hallways always smelled like cooking from a dozen different kitchens, where you could hear your neighbors through the thin walls, where the elevator had not worked in years, so everyone just used the stairs. It was not a bad place to live. It was just a hard place to live. Money was always tight. His mother worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. She left early in the morning before he woke up and came home late at night after he was supposed to be asleep. But he was never asleep. He always waited up for her, sitting by the window, watching for her figure to appear on the street below. His father was not in the picture. He had left when the boy was just a baby, and nobody talked about him much. There were no photos of him on the walls, no stories about him at dinner. It was like he had never existed at all. The boy learned early not to ask questions about it. Some doors are better left closed. So it's just the two of them. A mother and her son, trying to make it work in a world that did not make things easy for people like them. The boy was quiet. He had always been quiet. At school, he sat in the back of the classroom and barely said a word. He did not have many friends. Other kids thought he was strange. The way he would stare out the window during recess instead of playing. The way he would hum little melodies under his breath without even realizing he was doing it. They did not understand him. And when people do not understand something, they usually stay away from it. But the boy did not mind being alone. He had something that kept him company. Something that lived inside his head and made the loneliness feel less. Heavy dot music that he could not remember a time when music was not part of him. Even as a toddler, before he could speak in full sentences, he would bang on pots and pans in the kitchen, creating rhythms that actually sounded like something. His mother used to laugh and call him her little drummer. She did not know yet what she was seeing. She did not know that her son had a gift that most people could only dream of. When he was 6 years old, something happened that changed everything. There was a community center a few blocks from their apartment. It was an old building run by volunteers, where kids from the neighborhood could go after school to do homework or play games or just stay off the streets. The boy's mother signed him up because she could not afford a babysitter, and she needed somewhere safe for him to be while she worked. The community center was nothing fancy. Worn-out furniture, flickering lights, a basketball court with cracks in the pavement. But in the back corner of the main room, pushed against the wall like it had been forgotten, there was an old upright piano. It was not a beautiful piano. The wood was scratched and faded. Some of the keys were chipped. A few of them stuck when you pressed them down. But to the boy, it was the most wonderful thing he had ever seen. He still remembers the first time he touched it. He had wandered away from the other kids, following some invisible pull that he could not explain. He stood in front of the piano for a long time, just looking at it. Then, slowly, he reached out and pressed one key. The sound that came out was slightly out of tune, a little bit broken. But to him, it was magic. From that day on, the piano became his whole world. He would rush to the community center every day after school, not to play with the other kids, but to sit at that old piano in the corner. At first, he just pressed random keys, listening to the sounds they made, trying to understand how they fit together. But soon, that was not enough. He wanted to learn. He wanted to really play. The problem was, there was no one to teach him. Piano lessons cost money. Good piano lessons cost a lot of money. His mother could barely afford groceries some weeks. There was no way she could pay for a teacher. And the boy knew this. He saw how hard she worked. He saw the worry lines on her face when the bills came. He never asked her for lessons. He knew what the answer would be, and he did not want to make her feel bad for saying no. So he taught himself. He borrowed books from the library about music theory. He did not understand most of what he read, but he kept trying, kept pushing through the confusing parts until they started to make sense. He found videos online, tutorials from piano teachers who posted free lessons for beginners. He watched them over and over on an old phone with a cracked screen that one of the volunteers at the center had given him. Hour after hour, day after day, week after week, he practiced. His fingers were clumsy at first. They did not want to do what his brain was telling them to do. He made mistakes constantly. Wrong notes, bad timing, chords that sounded like noise instead of music. There were days when he wanted to give up, days when he felt like he would never get it right. But he kept going. Something inside him refused to quit. Some stubborn flame that would not be put out no matter how hard things got. He would practice until his fingers ached, until the other kids had gone home and the volunteers were turning off the lights. until his mother came to pick him up and found him still sitting there, still playing, still trying to get that one part right. The volunteers at the center started to notice him. At first, they just thought he was a kid who liked to bang on the piano. But as the months passed, they realized something was different about him. The sounds coming from that old piano were changing. They were becoming something real, something beautiful. One of the volunteers, an older man who had played guitar in a band when he was young, started staying late just to listen. He would sit in a chair across the room, pretending to read a newspaper, but really he was watching the boy, watching his fingers move, watching the way he closed his eyes when he played, like he was going somewhere else, somewhere only he could see. One night, a man walked over to the boy after he finished playing. He put a hand on his shoulder and said something simple. He said the boy had a gift, a real gift. And gifts like that do not come along very often. The boy did not know what to say. No one had ever told him anything like that before, but those words stayed with him. They planted something in his heart, a seed of belief, a tiny voice that whispered maybe, just maybe, he was meant for something more. He started practicing harder, longer. He moved beyond beginner songs and started learning pieces that were way above his level, pieces that professional pianists spent years perfecting. He failed at them over and over again. But each time he failed, he got a little bit better. Each time he fell, he got back up. His mother did not fully understand what was happening. She knew her son loved the piano. She heard him humming melodies at the dinner table, tapping rhythms on his knees while they watched TV. But she did not know how good he was getting. She did not know that her quiet little boy was becoming something extraordinary. Not until that day in the mall. Not until she stood in that crowd and heard him play like she had never heard him play before. That was when she finally understood. Her son was not just a boy who liked music. He was something special, and the whole world was about to find out. The woman with the silver hair made her way through the crowd slowly. People were still buzzing with excitement, talking to each other, looking at their phones, replaying the videos they had just recorded. But she moved through them like she had somewhere important to be. Because she did. When she reached the boy and his mother, she stopped. She waited for a moment, giving them space, watching the mother hold her son tight. She understood that some moments are sacred and should not be interrupted. So she waited. Finally, the mother pulled back and wiped her eyes. She looked up and noticed the woman standing there. There was something about her that demanded attention. She was dressed simply but elegantly. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were kind but serious. She looked like someone who had seen a lot of life and learned from all of it. The woman smiled gently and introduced herself. She explained that she was a music teacher, but not just any music teacher. She had spent over 40 years training some of the finest pianists in the country. She had worked at one of the most respected music academies in New York. She had helped students win national competitions, earn scholarships to famous conservatories, and build careers that took them around the world. She was retired now, mostly. She had moved to Chicago a few years ago to be closer to her family. She did not take students anymore. She had decided she was done with all that. But then she heard the boy play, and something inside her woke up. Something she thought she had put to rest a long time ago. The passion, the excitement, the thrill of discovering raw, untouched talent. It all came rushing back the moment his fingers touched those keys. She told the mother that her son had something special, something she had only seen a handful of times in her entire career. She said it was not just skill. Skill can be taught. What her son had was different. It was a connection to the music that could not be learned from books or videos. It was something he was born with. The The mother did not know what to say. She stood there, holding her son's hand, trying to process what she was hearing. This elegant woman, this stranger, was telling her things she had always felt but never had the words for. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a small card. She handed it to the mother and said she would like to teach the boy, privately, at no cost. She said she did not need the money, and she did not want it. What she wanted was the chance to help this boy become what he was meant to be. The mother looked at the card in her hand. Her fingers were trembling slightly. She looked at her son, who was looking back at her with those bright eyes, waiting to see what she would say. She looked at the woman, searching her face for any sign of dishonesty or hidden motives. But all she saw was sincerity. All she saw was someone who genuinely wanted to help. She said yes. That was the first miracle of that day. But it was not the last. Remember all those people who had recorded the boy playing? All those phones that had been held up in the air, capturing every note, every moment? Those videos did not just sit on people's phones. They went out into the world. That same night, someone uploaded their video to social media. They added a simple caption, something like "Random kid plays piano in mall and blows everyone away." They probably expected a few friends to see it, maybe a few dozen likes. Nothing more. But that is not what happened. By the next morning, the video had been shared thousands of times. By the afternoon, it had been picked up by news websites and entertainment blogs. By the evening, it had millions of views. Millions, from all over the world. People in Japan were watching it. People in Brazil. People in Germany and Australia and South Africa. Everyone was watching this small boy in an oversized jacket, playing a dusty piano in a Chicago mall, like his life depended on it. The comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. People were saying they had chills. People were saying they cried. People were sharing their own stories of dreams they had given up on, of talents they had let fade away, of moments when they wished someone had believed in them the way. This boy clearly believed in himself. The video was not just popular. It was touching something deep in people. It was reminding them of something they had forgotten. That beauty can come from anywhere. That greatness does not care about your address, or your bank account, or the clothes you wear. That sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most ordinary places. News reporters started showing up at the community center, asking questions, wanting interviews. The phone at the apartment started ringing with calls from people the mother had never heard of. Producers, agents, representatives from music schools. Everyone wanted to talk to the boy. Everyone wanted a piece of this story. It was overwhelming. The mother did not know how to handle it. She was a woman who had spent her whole life staying under the radar, working hard, keeping her head down. Suddenly, her son was famous. Suddenly, everyone knew his face. She was scared. She did not want her boy to be exploited. She did not want strangers to turn his gift into something ugly. But the silver-haired woman helped her navigate it all. She had seen this before, many times. She knew how the world worked when it discovered someone special. She helped the mother sort through the offers, separating the real ones from the fake ones, the good opportunities from the traps. She became more than a teacher. She became a protector, and through it all, the boy just kept playing. That was the thing about him. All the attention, all the cameras, all the noise. It did not change him. He was still the same quiet kid who sat in the back of the classroom. He was still the same boy who practiced until his fingers hurt because he loved the music, not because anyone was watching. One offer stood out from all the rest. It came from a music academy on the East Coast, one of the best in the entire country. They had seen the video. They had done their research. They had even contacted the silver-haired woman, who happened to be a former colleague, to ask about the boy. And they wanted to offer him a full scholarship. Everything paid for. Tuition, housing, instruments. Everything dot when the mother heard the news. She sat down on the kitchen chair and did not move for a long time. She just stared at the letter in her hands, reading the words over and over, not quite believing they were real. Her son, her quiet, dreaming, music-obsessed son. He was being offered a chance that most people never get. A chance to turn his gift into a future. She looked up at him. He was standing in the doorway, watching her, waiting. She could see the hope in his eyes. And the fear that this might all disappear, that someone would take it away, that he would wake up and find out it was just a dream. She stood up, walked over to him, and pulled him into a hug. She whispered in his ear that they were going to do this. They were going to take this chance. They were going to see how far his music could carry him. The boy did not say anything. He just hugged her back, tighter than he ever had before. Outside the window, the city kept moving. Cars honked. People rushed by on the sidewalks. The world kept spinning like it always did. But inside that small apartment, something had shifted. Something had changed forever. A door had opened, and the boy was ready to walk through it. He had no idea what was waiting on the other side. He had no idea how big his story was about to become, but he was about to find out. 2 years passed. 2 years of early mornings and late nights. 2 years of practice rooms and music theory and learning things that once seemed impossible. 2 years of growing, not just as a musician, but as a person. The boy was 12 now. He was a little taller, a little older, but still quiet. Still humble. Still the same kid who would rather listen than talk, who found his voice through his fingers instead of his words. The academy had changed many things about his life, but it had not changed who he was at his core. The scholarship had taken him and his mother to the East Coast. She had been terrified to leave Chicago. It was the only place she had ever known. But she would have followed her son anywhere. She got a job near the academy, something with better hours and better pay than anything she had back home. For the first time in years, she did not have to work 3 jobs just to survive. For the first time, she could actually watch her son grow. The silver-haired woman kept her promise. She taught him privately, pushing him harder than anyone ever had. She was not easy on him. She expected excellence. She demanded focus. When he made mistakes, she made him do it again. And again. And again. Until his fingers knew the music so well that he could play it in his sleep. But she also believed in him. On the hard days, when he felt like he could not keep up, when the other students at the academy seemed so far ahead of him, she would sit beside him on the piano bench and remind him why he was there. She would tell him that talent means nothing without heart, and heart was something he had more of than anyone she had ever met. He made friends at the academy. Real friends. Other kids who understood what it felt like to love something so much that it became part of you. Kids who did not think he was strange for wanting to practice instead of play video games. Kids who got excited about the same things he got excited about. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged somewhere, but he never forgot where he came from. He called the volunteers at the community center back in Chicago every few weeks. He sent letters to the old man who had first told him he had a gift. He kept a photo of that dusty mall piano in his room, taped to the wall above his desk, where he could see it every day. That photo reminded him of something important. It reminded him that he was not special because of the academy or the scholarship or the famous teacher. He was special because of that fire inside him, the one that had made him teach himself on a broken keyboard, the one that had kept him practicing when no one was watching, the one that had never gone out, no matter how hard things got dot, and now that fire was about to burn brighter than ever. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon. The boy was in a practice room, working on a piece he had been struggling with for weeks, when the silver-haired woman walked in. There was something different about her expression, something he had never seen before. She looked almost nervous, and she never looked nervous. She told him to sit down. Then she told him the news. He had been invited to perform at Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall, the most famous concert venue in the world. The place where legends had played. The place where careers were made. They wanted him to perform there as part of a special concert showcasing young talent. He would be the youngest performer on the program. The boy did not react at first. He just sat there, staring at her, trying to understand what she was saying. Carnegie Hall, him, the kid from the south side of Chicago who had learned piano from YouTube videos on a cracked phone. It did not seem real. It did not seem possible, but it was. The weeks leading up to the performance were intense. He practiced more than he ever had before. 8 hours a day, sometimes more. He played until his back ached and his eyes burned and his fingers felt like they might fall off. But he did not stop. He could not stop. This was his moment. The moment everything had been building toward. His mother watched him with a mixture of pride and worry. She could see how hard he was pushing himself. She wanted to tell him to slow down, to rest, to remember he was still just a kid. But she also knew him. She knew that this was who he was. This was how he loved, completely, without holding anything back. The night before the performance, she sat with him in his room. They did not talk much. They did not need to. She just held his hand, the way she used to when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. And he let her, even though he was 12 now, and probably too old for that kind of thing. She told him she was proud of him, not because of Carnegie Hall, not because of the scholarship or the viral video or any of that. She was proud of him because of who he was, because he had never let the hard times make him hard, because he had stayed kind and gentle and true to himself, even when the world tried to change him. He did not say anything. He just leaned his head against her shoulder and closed his eyes. The next evening, they arrived at Carnegie Hall. The building was massive, grand, intimidating. People in elegant clothes streamed through the doors, talking and laughing, carrying programs with the names of the performers inside. The boy's name was in there too, printed in black ink on white paper, right alongside musicians who had been training their whole lives. He stood backstage, waiting for his turn. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands were shaking slightly. He tried to take deep breaths, tried to calm himself down, but the nerves were overwhelming. This was the biggest moment of his life. What if he messed up? What if he forgot the notes? What if everyone realized he did not belong here after all? The silver-haired woman appeared beside him. She did not say anything at first. She just stood there, calm and steady, like a rock in a storm. Then she leaned close and whispered something in his ear. She told him to forget the audience. Forget the cameras. Forget Carnegie Hall. Just play the way he played that day in the mall. Play like no one was watching. Play from his heart. He nodded. He took one more breath. And then they called his name. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever. The stage was huge. The lights were blinding. The audience was a sea of faces, hundreds of people all looking at him, waiting to see what he could do. He sat down on the bench. He looked at the keys. They were perfect, polished, nothing like the dusty keys of that mall piano or the chipped keys of the old upright at the community center. But in that moment, they were all the same. They were just keys, and he knew what to do with them. He placed his fingers on the ivory. He closed his eyes, and he began to play. The music poured out of him like water from a spring. It filled the concert hall, every corner, every seat, every heart. It was the same music he had always played, the music that came from somewhere deep inside him, the music that had saved him on lonely nights and hard days and moments when he thought he would never be enough. In the front row, his mother sat with tears streaming down her face. Beside her, the silver-haired woman had her eyes closed, a small smile on her lips. Somewhere in that audience, the security guard from the mall was watching too. He had flown in just for this. He had to see it for himself, and all around the world. People who had seen that viral video 2 years ago were watching the live stream, recognizing the boy, remembering the moment that had touched them so deeply. The music built and swelled and soared. It told the story of a boy who had nothing but a dream, a boy who taught himself to fly, a boy who proved that greatness can come from anywhere if you just have the courage to believe. When he played the final note, the silence lasted only a second. Then the audience erupted. They stood. They cheered. They clapped until their hands hurt. The sound washed over him like a wave, and for the first time that night, he opened his eyes and looked out at the crowd. He saw his mother. He saw his teacher. He saw hundreds of strangers who had just become part of his story. And he smiled. He was just a boy at the piano, but he had just shown the whole world what that could mean.